A city on the edge of defeat. Radios whisper that the Allies aren't coming to save. They're coming to steal. Factories fall silent. Fear spreads faster than fire, and one lie begins to rule an entire nation. But when truth finally arrives, will anyone still believe it? Spring, 1943. Berlin moves in mechanical rhythm, but beneath its steady march, fear hums like an invisible current. In a gray building on Wilhelmstrasse, behind heavy curtains and locked doors, a new campaign is being born. Not of steel or gunpowder, but of words. Across the capital, printing presses throb through the night. Radio stations crackle with urgent broadcasts. Posters appear before dawn, plastered across factory walls, train stations, and schoolyards. They all carry one message: the Allies are not coming to free you. They are coming to take everything you own. The German propaganda ministry has chosen its next weapon: a war of perception. The target is not the enemy's soldiers, but Germany's own citizens. The goal is simple: make surrender unthinkable. In his office, the minister studies the latest intelligence from the front. The war is turning. Italy wavers. The Eastern Front bleeds resources, and Allied bombers now darken German skies almost daily. The military struggle may be losing momentum, but propaganda can still command faith. The campaign begins with radio. Familiar voices, calm and confident, fill the airwaves at every hour. The Americans, they say, are desperate. Their economy is drained. Their cities are in chaos. They covet what Germany has built: its industry, its gold, its ingenuity. Listeners hear these words not once, but dozens of times each week. In cafes, at workbenches, in the shelter during air raids, the same warnings repeat. The repetition is deliberate. Each broadcast plants a seed of suspicion. Each poster waters it. Soon, vivid images appear across the nation. American soldiers carrying sacks of German marks. British troops dismantling machines and loading them onto trucks. The faces are exaggerated, the actions clear. Theft, not liberation. The message is unmistakable: they want your future. For many Germans, the campaign feels disturbingly plausible. Only 25 years earlier, after the First World War, the Treaty of Versailles had drained the nation through reparations and humiliation. Now, as bombs fall again, those memories resurface. Propaganda twists them into proof. The Allies, it claims, are preparing to finish what Versailles began. Fear and pride fuse into a single emotion: defiance. Ordinary citizens, already weary from shortages and loss, find new purpose in this imagined threat. They are told they fight not for the Reich, but for their homes, their savings, their children's inheritance. The message cuts deeper than any political speech. It speaks directly to survival. The ministry's experts understand psychology well. They know fear alone breeds panic, but fear mixed with moral outrage breeds loyalty. So they craft a second layer to their story. The Americans, they insist, envy German precision and discipline. They cannot build what we build, so they will take it, unless we stop them. Factories receive official bulletins warning that Allied forces have already drawn up lists of German industries to be seized once they cross the border. Workers are urged to guard equipment, protect blueprints, and hide valuable materials. The line between rumor and instruction blurs. Some begin burying personal valuables in gardens. Others move savings into secret accounts. Mothers whisper to their children that the Americans will take their homes. A nation already surrounded by enemies now turns inward, consumed by invisible thieves. Behind the curtain, the propaganda ministry studies the results. Reports flood in. Citizens are stockpiling, workers volunteering for extra shifts, resistance to surrender rising. The campaign works. The lie breathes, and its rhythm matches the pulse of the nation. By early summer, the story evolves. Newspapers publish intelligence leaks, supposed Allied documents outlining plans to dismantle German industry. The forgeries are professional, detailed, convincing. They list real factories, real locations, One headline reads, "Foreign occupiers prepare to divide German wealth." The public never sees the original papers. They see only the headlines, the official commentaries, the outraged editorials. Truth becomes unnecessary. Emotion is enough. Across Berlin, the broadcasts intensify. Each hour seems to carry a new warning, each headline another spark for outrage. Propaganda has replaced reality. The average citizen no longer questions whether the Allies truly seek German wealth. They wonder only when the theft will begin. In the factories, tension thickens. Workers glance at one another with quiet suspicion. Some believe every word, others doubt, but few dare to speak. Dissent feels dangerous when fear itself has become patriotic. The timing of this campaign is no accident. As the tide of war shifts, Germany's leaders understand they can no longer promise victory. But they can promise vengeance. They can turn defeat into duty. If the people believe surrender means losing everything, they will fight even when fighting makes no sense. By the end of 1943, the wealth theft narrative has spread across every medium. It's in the newsreels shown before films, in the leaflets dropped over occupied territories, in the speeches broadcast from the heart of Berlin. It no longer feels like propaganda. It feels like common knowledge. What began as words has become a weapon sharper than any blade. And somewhere in that city of shadows, a man named Werner, a factory foreman, neither soldier nor zealot, will soon find himself caught between the story he's been told and the truth he cannot yet see. Because propaganda, once released, does not just change opinions. It rewrites reality. And in 1943, Germany, the unseen enemy isn't the Allies outside the borders. It's the idea growing inside every mind, that the truth itself cannot be trusted. In the months that follow, the propaganda machine evolves from noise into structure, a living system of deception. The ministry no longer reacts to events. It creates them. Every headline, every radio report, every whisper in a factory corridor now serves a single purpose: to feed the myth that the Allies plan to strip Germany bare. Inside the propaganda ministry, the effort is called the fabrication machine. Its architects study every piece of public fear like engineers tuning an engine. They ask themselves what people remember most vividly from the last war: hunger, unemployment, empty store shelves. Then they recreate those memories through carefully staged illusions. Newsreels show German families eating their last scraps of bread, claiming Allied embargoes have returned. But behind the camera, actors wear makeup to look thinner. Their homes are borrowed sets. Their despair is scripted. These moving pictures are not made to inform, but to imprint. The ministry pairs these visuals with selective history. The Treaty of Versailles, once just a page in textbooks, becomes proof of Allied greed. Radio hosts remind citizens that after the First World War, reparations took coal, steel, and dignity. This time, they warn, they won't just demand payments, they will take the source of our wealth itself. Every broadcast ties present fear to past humiliation. The lie feels less like invention and more like prophecy fulfilled. In the industrial city of Stuttgart, one man listens each night after long shifts at the Precision Instruments factory. His name is Werner. He is not political, not militant. His life revolves around measurements, machines, and routine. But the broadcasts reach even him. The factory produces delicate tools used in aircraft assembly. The posters on the walls now warn workers, "Protect your craft. The Americans already have you on their lists." A rumor spreads that foreign agents have cataloged every German factory worth taking. Some claim they've seen the lists. Others claim to have hidden theirs. Werner dismisses it at first, but the images linger. On his walk home, he passes shop windows displaying posters of Allied soldiers carrying stolen machinery. The artwork is crude but haunting. It speaks directly to his pride, the pride of a builder, a craftsman, a man whose entire life exists inside a machine shop. When the local newspaper prints an investigation alleging that American officers have met with bankers in neutral countries to plan Germany's post-war dismantling. Werner reads every word. The article includes maps and figures. It looks official. To him, it feels irrefutable. The propaganda no longer asks for his belief. It rewards it. Across the nation, the same pattern repeats. A radio rumor becomes a headline. A headline becomes a government bulletin. A bulletin becomes a conversation in the street. No one can tell where it began or who first said it. That confusion is by design. In one of the ministry's internal memos, a senior official writes, "If citizens cannot separate rumor from truth, both become tools of loyalty." The campaign expands further. Film reels distributed to cinemas across occupied Europe show bombed German factories. The narration blames the Allies, not for attacking military targets, but for trying to eliminate competition. Every destroyed building becomes evidence of economic warfare. Every air raid is recast as theft through destruction. The genius of the lie is its symmetry. Real events, the bombings, the shortages, the despair, serve as evidence for a false explanation. The more people suffer, the more credible the story becomes. Werner feels that logic closing in. He has seen the smoke on the horizon, the factory windows shattered after air raids. When the radio says these are not acts of war, but proof that the Allies want to erase German industry, it aligns perfectly with what he already sees. He begins to feel a quiet hatred he cannot name. Not rage toward the soldiers bombing his city, but toward the invisible planners said to be waiting to seize what remains. At night, he writes to his cousin in Munich. "They say the Americans already have our blueprints. They'll take the machines next," his cousin writes back, repeating the same rumors. Each letter echoes the broadcasts, unknowingly amplifying the lie. Meanwhile, in Berlin, ministry officials analyze reports of public behavior. Morale is improving, they say. Resistance to surrender is rising. People now hide valuables, reinforce storage rooms, and pledge loyalty to prevent theft. For the regime, fear has achieved what faith could not. But not all observers are within Germany. Across the Channel in London, analysts intercept fragments of German broadcasts. Among them is Lieutenant Marcus Cole, an American intelligence officer working with British counterparts. Cole studies the scripts, the phrasing, the emotional tone. He notices how precise the lies are, how they borrow real facts to mask manipulation. The reports disturb him. This isn't simple fear-mongering. It's targeted persuasion, each line engineered to touch memory, pride, and loss. Cole begins to realize this campaign isn't about morale alone. It's psychological fortification, a wall built from words, designed to keep truth out even when evidence arrives. Inside Germany, the propaganda ministry refines its masterpiece. The message becomes unavoidable. In classrooms, teachers warn students to guard family heirlooms. In churches, sermons twist spiritual duty into national defense. The war for minds has reached every home, and in Stuttgart, Werner can no longer tell where his thoughts end and the broadcasts begin. Each morning he reports to his factory, staring at the machines that have become both his pride and his fear. The propaganda whispers that these creations, the precise gears, the shining lenses, are all the enemy wants. To destroy them would be tragic. To surrender them would be treason. The myth has achieved its purpose. It no longer needs to be proven true. It only needs to be felt. As winter approaches, the lie feels unshakable. The Germans believe they are defending not a crumbling regime, but the future of their work, their wealth, their families. And Werner, like millions around him, cannot yet see that the real theft has already begun, not of gold or steel, but of truth itself. By early 1944, the propaganda campaign has become more than a message. It has become an ecosystem. It grows through every medium, adapting to every doubt, feeding on the fear it creates. No longer just a stream of words, it now has texture, form, and structure. Inside the ministry's gray offices in Berlin, officials speak of proof, propaganda, They say, must no longer rely on emotion alone. It must offer evidence, or at least the illusion of it. And so begins a new phase, the network of deception. Forged documents start circulating. Some look like intercepted Allied plans, others like confidential military reports. They list German factories, banks, and even small businesses supposedly marked for seizure. Each document bears the right signatures, the correct seals, and the smell of authenticity. They are distributed to local officials, who pass them on to town leaders, who then read them aloud in community halls. The effect is immediate. The written word gives shape to what the people already fear. It transforms rumor into apparent reality. In Stuttgart, Werner attends one of these community meetings. The hall is packed. Families sit shoulder to shoulder, the air thick with worry and exhaustion. On the stage, a local official unfolds a document stamped with an Allied insignia. His voice trembles with rehearsed outrage as he reads out the names of German factories supposedly targeted for dismantling. Werner hears the name of his own factory on the list. His heart sinks. Around him, people murmur, some in disbelief, others in anger. The official warns that Allied forces are equipped not just for combat, but for confiscation. They have machines, he says, designed to measure, to pack, to carry away everything we have built. The audience leaves in silence. Outside, no one questions the paper's origin. No one asks how a local official could possess secret Allied documents. In that moment, doubt feels like betrayal. At home, Werner cannot sleep. The words echo in his mind. They will take what you have built. He remembers the posters, the radio broadcasts, the newsreels, all aligning perfectly with this supposed evidence. The pieces fit too neatly to question. Across Germany, similar scenes unfold. Farmers hide tools, craftsmen seal up workshops, families bury silverware in gardens. Fear transforms into ritual. Every act of concealment feels like an act of patriotism. The propaganda has achieved what the regime always wanted: emotional obedience disguised as duty. Meanwhile, the ministry tightens control over the flow of information. Each local newspaper receives guidance sheets, dictating what stories to print, what rumors to amplify, what doubts to ignore. Even editors who privately question the campaign obey. Because disobedience carries its own risks, a senior propagandist writes in his internal notes, "We no longer need to tell people what to believe. We need only tell them what to fear." But outside Germany's borders, not everyone is deceived. In London, Allied intelligence monitors German broadcasts, trying to decode the tone and timing. Among those studying the recordings is Lieutenant Marcus Cole. A methodical analyst with a quiet intensity, Cole listens for patterns, phrases repeated across different programs, small linguistic shifts revealing new strategy. He begins to notice something strange. The wealth theft narrative isn't random hysteria. It follows a deliberate rhythm. When Germany loses territory, broadcasts about Allied greed intensify. When cities suffer bombings, the message expands. They destroy what they cannot steal. Cole marks these changes on a timeline. The propaganda doesn't just react to defeats, it uses them. The greater the military loss, the stronger the illusion of moral victory through resistance. In his reports, Cole describes it as a self-feeding illusion. The campaign convinces citizens that every defeat proves the enemy's villainy, not the regime's weakness. It's psychological architecture, built to sustain loyalty long after reason collapses. Inside Germany, that architecture reaches new heights. Local councils form defense committees, small civilian groups tasked with protecting community assets. In theory, they're organized to prevent looting. In practice, they're enforcers of belief. Anyone expressing doubt about the propaganda becomes suspect. Werner's foreman warns him not to question official news. "Words are being watched," he says quietly. The sentence sounds more like advice than threat, but the meaning is clear. Silence becomes survival. Weeks pass, and the fear spreads like fog. The propaganda ministry releases new pamphlets claiming Allied soldiers have been caught looting in North Africa and Italy. The stories are fabricated but presented as eyewitness accounts. They describe homes emptied, treasures taken, vivid, emotional, unforgettable. For Werner, each new story feels like confirmation. He no longer distinguishes between real news and planted fiction. The line between defense and delusion blurs until both feel identical. Back in London, Cole receives a report from a captured German courier. Among the seized materials are internal propaganda manuals. They reveal a chilling precision, charts showing emotional triggers, lists of desirable civilian reactions, and sample scripts for broadcasts. Cole studies one line repeatedly. Economic fear outlasts military defeat. He realizes the campaign's deeper objective. It isn't just to motivate soldiers, it's to ensure that when Germany collapses, the people will resist reconstruction. If citizens believe the Allies intend to plunder them, they'll sabotage peace efforts long after the war ends. The lie is designed to survive the battlefield. Cole forwards his findings to Washington, warning that this psychological operation could complicate post-war stability. His report closes with a single observation. Their greatest weapon is belief itself. By spring, the network of deception reaches its peak. The propaganda has infected every institution: the press, the pulpit, the classroom, even dinner table conversation. It thrives because it feels personal, tailored to every fear. In Stuttgart, Werner keeps a hidden notebook filled with warnings from the radio. He records each message like a soldier keeping orders. Protect the machinery. Guard the blueprints. Hide the instruments. The entries become his ritual of control in a world slipping beyond it. But beneath the surface, cracks are forming. Small inconsistencies appear. Reports of Allied units rebuilding towns in France, of American medics treating civilians, of captured soldiers claiming they're bringing food, not theft. The rumors sound impossible, yet they persist. Werner ignores them for now. The lie still feels safer than uncertainty. He doesn't yet know that far beyond his city. Lieutenant Cole has begun to understand the deception's ultimate design, and that soon, the first tremors of truth will begin to shake the walls of this carefully built illusion. Spring, 1944. The war that once seemed endless now trembles on its foundations. Across Europe, Allied forces push forward through France. Town by town, the Nazi map begins to shrink. But even as the front lines move westward, another battle rages in the shadows, the fight for what people still believe. Inside Germany, the propaganda machine doesn't falter. It adapts. New broadcasts echo through battered cities. Do not be fooled by enemy promises. Their kindness is deception. Their aid is the mask of thieves. The words flow like poison wrapped in comfort. But reality has begun to tell a different story. In newly liberated towns across France and Belgium, something unexpected happens. Instead of looting, American and British forces help repair power lines, reopen factories, restore railways. Where propaganda promised plunder, people find reconstruction. At first, these reports reach Germany as faint whispers, foreign radio fragments, smuggled letters, word of mouth. The regime scrambles to respond. Within days, the propaganda ministry twists the story again. It's a performance, they insist, a staged act to win trust before the real theft begins. The lie mutates, never dying, only evolving. In Stuttgart, Werner hears rumors from a cousin living near Paris. The letter arrives through secret channels, folded within a shipment of machine parts. The handwriting trembles, the message brief: "The Americans are not what they say. They help us rebuild. They pay for our work. They fix what was destroyed." Werner stares at the words for hours. They don't fit with what he's been told. According to every broadcast, the Allies should be dismantling those same factories. The contradiction gnaws at him. Has his cousin been deceived? Or has he? Still, doubt feels dangerous. He hides the letter in a drawer and returns to work. But something inside him has shifted. The propaganda that once filled him with certainty now feels slightly off-key, too loud, too desperate, too insistent. Across the front, Allied intelligence begins to piece together how deep the deception runs. Lieutenant Marcus Cole's unit captures a transport truck near Normandy, filled not with weapons, but propaganda materials, posters, pamphlets, and thousands of leaflets waiting for distribution. Among them, Cole finds something different. A thick folder marked Economic Defense Directives. Inside are documents outlining the wealth theft narrative in chilling detail. Charts, timelines, and psychological assessments describe which fears to trigger and when. One page stands out. Sustain anger by aligning theft with patriotism. Make the defense of property equal the defense of nation. Cole studies the files late into the night. It becomes clear that the lie isn't random, it's structural. Each message is timed to follow battlefield events, turning defeat into justification. Each rumor anticipates truth and twists it before it arrives. Days later, Cole's unit captures a German propaganda officer hiding among civilians. The man appears nervous but resigned. During interrogation, he speaks in calm, almost clinical tones. He admits that much of the propaganda has nothing to do with the Allies' real actions. Its purpose, he says, is psychological endurance, keeping German civilians afraid enough to obey and angry enough to fight. Then he adds something else. The narrative about Allied theft wasn't only to motivate resistance, it also provided cover for what the regime itself was doing. Cole listens carefully as the officer explains. For months, Nazi officials have been transferring assets, gold, art, industrial goods out of Germany, hiding them in underground vaults or sending them abroad under false names. While citizens fear Allied plunder, their own leaders are looting the nation for personal survival. The realization chills Cole. The propaganda isn't just a lie. It's projection, a mirror turned outward. Everything the regime accuses the Allies of planning is what it is already doing. Cole records the testimony and sends it up the chain of command. He writes in his report, "They accuse us of the theft they themselves commit. The propaganda hides their crime by assigning it to us." Inside Germany, the lie continues to corrode reality. Werner notices the city's growing emptiness. Warehouses cleared, trains departing at night, rumors of valuable cargo leaving for the south. Officials claim it's all strategic relocation. But to Werner, the pattern feels familiar. The very theft he fears from the Allies now seems to be happening under his own flag. Still, he cannot admit it openly. The propaganda has been too total, the illusion too complete. To question it is to question every sacrifice made since the war began. Then, one evening, the radio carries unexpected news. Allied troops have liberated Paris. The broadcast's tone is calm, almost rehearsed. The announcer insists this is a temporary setback. "The thieves are advancing," he says, "but their time will come. They will overreach." Werner listens without emotion. For the first time, the words don't land. The slogans feel hollow, their rhythm mechanical. He turns the dial off mid-sentence. The silence that follows feels heavier than the propaganda itself. Meanwhile, in Allied intelligence circles, Cole and his team discuss the long-term implications of what they've discovered. The wealth theft campaign, Cole concludes, is one of the most effective psychological operations of the war. Not because it convinced everyone, but because it made truth irrelevant. It created a moral fog thick enough to keep civilians complicit long after reason failed. He writes in his field journal, "They taught a nation to confuse lies with loyalty." By late 1944, the German front begins to collapse. Allied units report entering towns where civilians have burned factories rather than surrender them. Entire industries, once Germany's pride, vanish in smoke, sacrificed to illusion. Werner watches it unfold in disbelief. The destruction isn't forced by the enemy. It's self-inflicted, commanded by fear. What the propaganda demanded, deny the enemy their prize, has become a nationwide ritual. And yet, amidst the ruin, a new truth is spreading quietly. Letters, rumors, captured broadcasts all whisper the same idea. The Allies aren't taking, they're restoring. The illusion that bound a nation is fraying. But even as truth returns, it must fight against years of conditioning. For people like Werner, belief has become armor, and removing it feels like exposure. The unseen enemy that once hid in Allied shadows now reveals itself clearly. It was never outside the borders. It was the lie that lived within them. Winter, 1945. Germany stands on the edge of collapse. Cities once pulsing with industry now lie silent, their chimneys cold, their streets littered with the wreckage of belief. The empire that promised 1,000 years of triumph is measured now in weeks. Yet in the ruins, the propaganda still speaks. Even as Allied artillery echoes in the distance, radio voices insist, destroy what they cannot have. Leave them nothing. To the last moment, the lie demands loyalty. In Stuttgart, the once busy factory where Werner spent half his life now sits half empty. Machines covered in tarps, production halted. Official orders arrive from the local party office. All valuable equipment must be rendered unusable before the Americans arrive. If it cannot be moved, the notice reads, it must be destroyed. Werner stares at the document for a long time. Its seal gleams faintly in the gray light, an emblem of authority that has ruled his life. Around him, a few remaining workers whisper nervously. Some nod in agreement. Obedience has kept them safe this long. Others remain silent, eyes hollow from exhaustion. For months, propaganda had told them that American forces were coming as thieves, that every machine left standing would be stripped, every tool taken, every home emptied. Now, that fear demands a final act of faith, to destroy their own labor before the imagined thief arrives. Werner walks the length of the factory floor. The smell of metal and oil clings to the air. He runs a hand along the smooth casing of a precision lathe, the machine he's maintained for over a decade. He remembers the first day it was installed. The pride, the precision, the sense of purpose. Now he is told to destroy it. His hands tremble. He feels the weight of years pressing against the lie. If he obeys, he betrays everything he's built. If he refuses, he betrays everything he's been told to defend. That night, he goes home but cannot rest. Outside, the sound of distant shell fire rumbles through the city. He looks at the posters still clinging to the walls, faded now, edges torn by wind. The painted faces of American soldiers with bags of stolen gold look almost absurd under the flickering streetlight. By morning, he makes his choice. He returns to the factory before dawn, alone. The cold air burns his lungs. In the stillness, he walks between the machines, checking each one, making sure they remain untouched. He opens the doors wide, leaving them unlocked. For the first time in years, Werner decides to stop obeying fear. As daylight grows, the city shakes with distant explosions. Word spreads quickly. The Americans are entering Stuttgart. People hurry to hide what little they have left. The radio sputters with frantic orders before falling silent. Werner stands by a window and watches. Down the street, a column of armored vehicles moves cautiously through the city. But instead of the chaos he was told to expect, he sees order. Soldiers directing civilians to safety, medical trucks stopping to help the wounded, officers speaking with calm authority. He waits for the looting that propaganda promised. The bags of coins, the dismantled machines, the chaos. But it doesn't come. The soldiers move past the factory gates, not to seize, but to secure. When the first American unit finally enters the building, Werner braces himself. His heart races as he imagines the confiscation beginning. But the soldiers don't touch the machines. They move methodically, inspecting, documenting, asking questions through translators. Their leader, a young officer in a worn overcoat, studies the facility carefully. That officer is Lieutenant Marcus Cole. Cole has seen dozens of factories like this one across Germany. Some destroyed, some abandoned, some deliberately sabotaged. But this one is intact. The equipment stands ready. Cole senses that something different happened here. Through a translator, he asks who oversaw the plant. Werner steps forward, cautious but steady. Cole nods, his tone measured. He asks about the factory's purpose, its machinery, its workers. Werner answers, expecting interrogation, maybe accusation. Instead, Cole's next question catches him off guard. Can this equipment produce civilian goods once the war ends? Werner hesitates. The translator repeats the question. He nods slowly, uncertain. Cole gestures toward the machines. We'll need industry for reconstruction, he says. Not weapons, tools, instruments, parts. For rebuilding. The conversation is brief, professional, almost mundane. But for Werner, it feels like a revelation. The propaganda he believed for 2 years collapses in that moment. The supposed thieves came not to take, but to restore. The enemy he feared now speaks of rebuilding what his own leaders ordered him to destroy. Later that evening, as dusk settles, Werner walks through the quiet factory. The Americans have posted guards at the gates, not to strip the place bare, but to protect it from looters. The irony stings. The protection he once feared comes from those he was taught to hate. In a nearby street, civilians cautiously emerge from basements, guided by Allied patrols offering food and medical care. No one expected kindness. For many, it's almost unbearable to accept. Across the region, similar scenes unfold. American units enter towns expecting hostility, but find confusion instead. Some citizens weep openly. Others avert their eyes, ashamed. The gulf between belief and reality is too wide to cross in a day. Lieutenant Cole records what he sees. His reports describe cities paralyzed not just by destruction, but by disbelief. They were prepared for looters, he writes, but not for help. For Werner, that night becomes the dividing line of his life. Before it, fear, obedience, illusion. After it, silence, reflection, the slow unlearning of a lie that once felt like truth. He stands at the factory window, watching the Americans set up a command post in the courtyard. A generator hums to life, casting light across machines that were almost lost to propaganda's final order. Werner realizes something profound. The victory of truth is rarely loud. It doesn't arrive with banners or speeches. It arrives quietly, in small acts that make lies impossible to sustain. The next morning, Lieutenant Cole walks through the factory once more, checking equipment. He finds Werner there, making notes about what can be repaired, what can be repurposed. Their eyes meet for a brief moment. No words exchanged, only an understanding. For both men, the war of weapons is ending, but the war of truth has only begun. As Cole leaves, he glances back at the machines gleaming faintly in the light. The very instruments propaganda demanded be destroyed now stand as proof of what fear nearly erased. Outside, the sound of distant church bells mingles with the soft rumble of Allied trucks. For the first time in years, the city breathes. Werner exhales slowly. The lie that consumed a nation has finally begun to die. Not with explosions or declarations, but with the simple sight of Americans guarding, not taking. The war for Germany's mind is ending. And reality, at last, is beginning to speak for itself. In the first months after Germany's surrender, silence becomes the country's most common language. The guns stop, but the echoes of deception still hang in the air. People emerge from ruins, blinking at a world that feels both familiar and foreign. For the first time in years, there are no orders, only questions. Everywhere, Allied forces uncover evidence of what the propaganda had hidden. Abandoned mines filled with gold, barns stacked with stolen paintings, entire trainloads of valuables hidden under false manifests, caches of silver, jewelry, sculptures, and priceless manuscripts, all marked with the insignias of the same regime that warned its citizens of Allied greed. In the hills outside Stuttgart, an American patrol opens a sealed warehouse. Inside, crates stretch wall to wall, labeled with names of families long vanished. Among them lie shipments from cities across occupied Europe. Some crates bear a chilling mark: for transport south. The inventory reveals treasures stripped not by enemies, but by the German state itself. When word reaches Lieutenant Marcus Kohl, he joins a documentation team cataloging the discoveries. His field reports read like moral autopsies. The scale of theft, he writes, defies comprehension. Entire nations have been emptied, their culture packed into crates. The irony is almost unbearable. The propaganda that warned citizens of Allied plunder had served as camouflage for the regime's own greed. While ordinary Germans feared losing their possessions to foreigners, their leaders were quietly stealing from everyone, including them. Werner learns of these findings through the occupation administration. His factory, once a tool of precision, now serves a new purpose. Under Allied oversight, it's used to sort and record recovered materials. Each crate that passes through bears silent testimony to the truth. One afternoon, a truck arrives carrying documents seized from a burned government archive. Among the papers, an American officer recognizes the insignia of the propaganda ministry. He sets them aside for translation. Days later, Kohl arrives to examine them. Inside are memoranda detailing the Wealth Protection Campaign, the internal name for the propaganda operation. The documents are meticulous, written in bureaucratic calm. They outline schedules for broadcast, sample radio scripts, and statistical predictions about public reaction. Kohl reads one line repeatedly: "Our message must always mirror the crime we commit. This is how we protect ourselves." The revelation feels both clinical and monstrous. The authors of these directives had never believed their own lies. They had built the narrative of Allied theft to conceal their own. When Kohl shares the discovery with his team, no one speaks for a moment. There is no satisfaction in uncovering such truth, only a heavy understanding of how deeply manipulation can root itself in fear. Later that week, Werner requests permission to see the recovered propaganda files. The Americans agree. Under supervision, he sits in a quiet room with folders stacked before him. The familiar stamps and signatures sting with recognition. He unfolds the first sheet and begins to read. The words are chillingly familiar: phrases from the radio, sentences from newspapers, slogans once painted across his factory walls. Every line he once believed is here, planned, approved, timed. The deception was not spontaneous. It was manufactured with precision. He reads instructions given to local officials: encourage destruction of property if occupation appears imminent. Frame it as duty. That single line freezes him. It is the order he almost obeyed. Werner lowers the paper slowly. The machinery he saved, the tools he refused to destroy, those were almost lost because of these words. He realizes now that his defiance, once guilt-ridden, was his first act of freedom. Kohl joins him briefly in the records room. Through the translator, Werner asks a question that has no simple answer. Why? Kohl hesitates. Then, quietly, he replies, because fear works faster than truth. For Werner, that sentence lingers long after Kohl leaves. Fear had built his loyalty, guided his choices, shaped his silence. And now, stripped of it, he feels both liberated and hollow. Across Germany, more truths emerge. Secret bank accounts in Switzerland, trains full of gold rerouted through the Alps, archives proving systematic plunder. The public begins to understand that the Allied thieves were imaginary, while the real theft, vast and deliberate, had been carried out in their name. Newsreels produced by the Allies document these findings for historical record. German civilians are shown the evidence. Some turn away. Others stare at the images in stunned disbelief. For many, it's not outrage they feel. It's betrayal. Werner watches one such film at a local hall. The footage shows warehouses piled with stolen art, gold bars stamped with European mint marks, churches stripped of relics. A narrator explains the irony without emotion. While Germany feared plunder from abroad, its rulers plundered the continent. He leaves the hall in silence. The evening air feels heavier than before. For years, propaganda told him who to hate, what to fear, whom to blame. Now, with that scaffolding gone, he's left facing the emptiness beneath it. Days later, Kohl's unit completes their analysis of the propaganda archives. The findings are sent to Allied command for use in post-war tribunals. But for Kohl, the significance lies beyond the evidence. It's in what it reveals about human vulnerability. He writes in his final intelligence memo, "The deception succeeded, not because it was brilliant, but because it was familiar. It spoke to pride, to loss, to memory." Propaganda does not invent. It rearranges what people already believe. Werner spends long hours walking the quiet streets near his factory. The Americans have begun clearing rubble, reopening workshops, and hiring locals for reconstruction. One morning, he sees new posters, different ones. They show hands rebuilding walls, machines restarting, crops being planted. The words beneath them read, "Work creates peace." He feels an ache of recognition. Propaganda again, but this time for recovery, not fear. The contrast feels almost unbearable. That evening, an Allied officer visits the factory. He informs Werner that the plant's future will shift toward civilian production. Medical instruments, measuring devices, tools for rebuilding rather than destruction. Werner nods. The irony is complete. The very machines he once feared losing to foreign hands will now help rebuild the nation those same hands occupy. As the officer leaves, Werner returns to his desk and looks at a small photograph pinned to the wall. A picture of the factory's workers years earlier, smiling beside newly installed machines. He studies their faces, remembering how easily pride became fear, and fear became loyalty. He whispers to himself, not as confession, but as understanding. They never stole from us. They made us steal from ourselves. In that moment, the full truth settles, quiet, devastating, and undeniable. The war for territory may be over, but the war for truth leaves deeper scars. The propaganda promised protection, but delivered ruin. It warned of thieves who never came, while the real theft happened in silence, carried out by those trusted most, and somewhere deep inside the rebuilt factory, the echoes of that deception remain, a haunting reminder that the greatest plunder of war is not gold or land, but the mind itself. Summer 1945. The war is over, but the ruins remain. Vast, silent witnesses to a decade of lies. Smoke no longer rises from the cities, yet the air still carries the weight of disbelief. Across Germany, people begin to rebuild not just their homes, but their understanding of the world itself. Stuttgart is a city of hollow shells and open wounds. Streets that once roared with machines now echo with the hammering of reconstruction. The Allied occupation brings rules, rations, and supervision, but also something unexpected: opportunity. Werner's factory stands among the few structures still intact. The Americans have turned it into a hub for industrial recovery. Engineers, economists, and German technicians work side by side under Allied guidance. The mission is no longer victory, but revival. At first, the cooperation feels unnatural. Years of propaganda still linger like dust on every surface. Workers glance uneasily at the Americans walking through the plant. The posters of fear are gone, but their ghosts remain. Werner oversees production again, though the purpose has changed. No more instruments for aircraft. Now, his machines produce measuring tools, medical components, and precision parts for rebuilding the power grid. Each piece feels like a small step away from darkness. He works closely with American engineers who bring patience instead of authority. They ask questions, not demands. The difference disarms him. Day by day, suspicion erodes under the quiet rhythm of shared labor. One afternoon, an American officer stops by, Lieutenant Marcus Cole. His assignment has shifted from intelligence to documentation. The war's propaganda operations are being studied for what they reveal about human psychology. Cole travels across Germany collecting testimonies, examining how ordinary people believed extraordinary lies. He recognizes Werner's name from previous reports and visits the factory. The two men meet briefly, not as conqueror and conquered, but as witnesses on opposite sides of the same illusion. Through a translator, Cole asks simple questions. What made the propaganda believable? What did it feel like to doubt it? Werner answers carefully, his words weighed with shame and reflection. It sounded like truth, he says, because it used our memories. It told us what we feared, not what was real. Cole nods. It's the same conclusion his research has led him to. Propaganda, he's learned, doesn't rely on ignorance. It thrives on emotion. The most effective lies use fragments of truth to build walls against reason. In his reports, Cole notes that Germans like Werner are not anomalies but archetypes, ordinary people shaped by extraordinary manipulation. He writes, "They believed not because they were blind, but because they were tired of uncertainty." The lie promised order. For Werner, the process of unlearning is slower. Every day he works beside Americans, repairing what his own government told him would be destroyed. The contradiction still stings. Yet as factories restart and trade returns, the evidence becomes impossible to deny. The Americans provide materials, training, and loans. They rebuild bridges, reopen schools, restore energy grids. Where propaganda predicted looting, reality delivers reconstruction. Each improvement chips away at the remnants of fear. But truth, Werner realizes, doesn't erase guilt. It amplifies it. For every repaired wall, he sees the wasted years spent defending illusions. At night, he walks home through the dimly lit streets, passing houses without roofs, churches without bells. On the walls, new posters appear. They bear messages of cooperation and progress. Together, we rebuild. Work for a new future. The words feel genuine, yet their familiarity unsettles him. After all, he has seen how easily words can turn into weapons. One morning, Cole invites Werner to contribute to his post-war research. He wants first-hand accounts of how the wealth theft propaganda affected factory workers. Werner hesitates, then agrees. In his written statement, he confesses the power the lie once held over him. "We were taught to see theft in every foreign hand," he writes, "but it was our own hands carrying out destruction. We thought we were protecting Germany, but we were only protecting the people who deceived us." When Cole reads Werner's account, he marks it for inclusion in his final study. The words capture what statistics cannot, the emotional anatomy of deception. Meanwhile, the Allied administration begins planning Germany's long-term recovery. The program that would later be known as the Marshall Plan takes shape. Its goal, to rebuild, not punish. Factories like Werner's are vital to that effort. Werner becomes part of a new mission, producing precision tools for rebuilding Europe's infrastructure. It's strange redemption. The machines that once served destruction now serve reconstruction. In conversations with American officers, Werner learns that the Allies' true strategy was never theft, but stability. They understood that a starving, broken Germany would breed future conflict. Economic recovery was the only sustainable victory. The realization cuts deep. The propaganda's greatest deception wasn't its lies about Allied motives, it was its erasure of human decency. It made people believe that compassion was impossible, that every foreign hand was a threat. Now, standing beside American workers, Werner sees how untrue that was. Months pass. The rhythm of rebuilding grows steadier. Streets reopen, markets return, Families begin to dream again. Yet, for many Germans, emotional recovery lags behind physical reconstruction. Kohl finishes his work in Stuttgart and prepares to return to Washington. Before leaving, he visits the factory one last time. He finds Werner overseeing a shipment of instruments bound for hospitals in France. Through the translator, Kohl tells him, "You helped build what comes next." Werner looks at the crates, then at the man once considered his enemy. "I helped build what was almost lost," he replies. Kohl smiles faintly. That's where rebuilding starts. They shake hands, a gesture simple yet monumental. Two men from opposite sides of the same war, united by the recognition that truth, once buried, can still grow from ruin. After Kohl's departure, Werner keeps working, driven by a quiet determination. His factory becomes a model of cooperation, a symbol of how industry once used for division can serve unity instead. But even as peace returns, he knows that the scars of deception run deeper than rubble. Propaganda, he realizes, doesn't end when the words stop. It lives on in memory, in doubt, in the fragile space between what people saw and what they were told to see. For Werner, rebuilding Germany means more than replacing brick and steel. It means learning to trust again, not in governments or flags, but in simple truth. And for Lieutenant Kohl, the war leaves a different legacy. His intelligence work transforms into a lifelong study of psychological warfare. He carries with him the memory of those documents, those voices, those ordinary people trapped inside extraordinary lies. In one of his final reports before returning home, Kohl writes, "We won the war with armies, but we secured peace with truth." The cost of deception is not measured in bombs or casualties, but in the years it steals from the human spirit. Werner never reads that report, but he lives its message every day. The machines that once trembled under propaganda's shadow now hum steadily again, shaping tools for a rebuilt world. The war for belief has ended. The work of understanding has just begun. Years pass. The guns are silent, the rubble cleared, and the world begins to call this new era peace. But beneath the calm surface, echoes of the propaganda war still linger. Faint, but persistent. The lies that once fueled a nation's fury have faded, yet their residue clings to memory. By the early 1950s, Germany hums again with industry. Smoke rises from factory chimneys not as signal of war, but as symbol of renewal. Werner's factory stands among the success stories of the post-war years. Under new management, with Allied and German engineers working side by side, it produces the tools of progress, precision instruments used in medicine, construction, and education. The transformation is complete, at least on the surface. But Werner knows that rebuilding metal and brick is easier than rebuilding trust. He still remembers the nights of blind faith, the days of mechanical obedience, the morning he chose to disobey fear. The war has ended, but its illusion still breathes quietly inside him. He keeps one artifact from that time, a propaganda poster he rescued from a collapsing wall in 1945. It shows American soldiers loading German machinery onto trucks, their faces exaggerated with greed. Once, it filled him with dread. Now, it hangs framed in his office, not as a reminder of enemies, but of himself, of how easily conviction can replace truth. Workers sometimes ask why he keeps it. He answers simply, to remember what words can do. Beyond Stuttgart, scholars and intelligence officers begin studying the Nazi propaganda machine in detail. Lieutenant Marcus Kohl, now back in Washington, leads part of the effort. His wartime reports form the foundation of a new field, psychological warfare analysis. Kohl's work isn't just military research, it's moral archaeology. He dissects the wealth theft narrative piece by piece, examining how it used fragments of history and emotion to create total belief. His findings circulate through universities and government agencies, shaping how future generations understand deception. In his lectures, Kohl often quotes a line from his final wartime memo, The most dangerous lie is the one that feels like memory. He never forgets Werner, the quiet man who stood between destruction and conscience. Their brief exchanges in post-war Germany become a personal anchor for him, proof that truth doesn't always arrive with triumph, but sometimes with quiet recognition. Back in Stuttgart, Werner's life settles into steady rhythm. The city thrives again. Streets fill with bicycles and laughter. Shops reopen, and children who never saw the war grow up in classrooms decorated with maps of a peaceful world. Yet for those who lived through the years of deception, peace carries its own complexity. In the evenings, Werner gives occasional talks at community centers and schools. His voice remains calm, measured, but his words carry the gravity of experience. He doesn't speak about battles or military victories. He speaks about the invisible war, the war of words. He tells the young listeners how fear was shaped into duty, how propaganda turned neighbors into believers, how lies demanded loyalty while truth demanded courage. He explains how the posters on factory walls seemed harmless until they replaced reality itself. Sometimes he brings the old poster with him, unfolding it carefully before the audience. He points to the image and says, "This is what I believed, and it almost made me destroy my life's work." The students listen quietly, many too young to imagine what such trust in falsehood feels like. But Werner speaks not to accuse, only to remind. "You don't need war for propaganda," he tells them. "You only need fear and repetition." His talks attract historians and journalists who record his words. Over time, Werner becomes an unlikely voice of moral clarity, not a hero, but a witness. His story appears in small magazines, later in documentaries about post-war recovery. He never exaggerates, never dramatizes. His truth is simple, and that simplicity makes it powerful. Meanwhile, Kohl's reports from the war are declassified and published in academic studies. His name becomes quietly respected among scholars of history and media. His conclusion remains timeless. Propaganda doesn't die with the regime that created it. It adapts, waiting for the next voice willing to use fear as fuel. He writes, "The propaganda of theft taught an entire population to distrust compassion. That is its longest shadow." Werner continues his talks into the 1960s, long after his hair turns white and his hands stiffen from years of factory work. He doesn't see himself as a victim or an expert, just someone who once believed too easily. He often ends his lectures the same way, by describing the moment he met the American officer who came to his factory, the moment the lie died. He says he doesn't remember the officer's name, but he remembers the silence between them, the absence of accusation, the quiet tone that made truth undeniable. "To me," he tells them, "that silence was louder than all the propaganda combined." As the years pass, Germany transforms into a new nation, democratic, industrious, determined to remember. Museums display exhibits on wartime propaganda, featuring posters, recordings, and films once used to shape belief. Students read excerpts from Allied intelligence reports, including Kohl's, studying how lies can masquerade as patriotism. Werner visits one such exhibition shortly before retiring. He walks past glass cases filled with old pamphlets and forged documents, the same type that once listed his factory as a target for plunder. Seeing them preserved under glass, labeled and analyzed, he feels both relief and melancholy. The past, he realizes, has finally become history. But history still speaks, in quiet, enduring echoes. As he leaves the museum, the sunlight catches the edges of a display card beside the propaganda poster he once kept in his office. The caption reads, "Fear is the oldest tool of control." Werner stops for a moment and smiles faintly. Outside, the city hums with the noise of progress, streetcars, conversation, life continuing. He steps into the light, the echo of lies behind him, the weight of truth beside him. History remembers wars by their battles, their leaders, and their victories. But the propaganda war of World War II left a different kind of scar. one that could not be photographed, only felt. It was a war fought not for land, but for perception. And even after the last shot was fired, the damage it caused lingered in the human spirit. The wealth theft propaganda had promised Germans that the Allies would strip their nation bare, that surrender meant slavery, and peace meant poverty. Yet when peace came, the opposite proved true. American policy focused not on punishment, but on rebuilding. An idea so alien after years of fear that many could hardly believe it. For Werner, this truth took time to accept. He saw it every day in the faces of workers repairing bridges, engineers rebuilding power lines, and American officers who spoke of cooperation rather than conquest. The lie had told him that foreigners would take everything. Instead, they gave him the chance to start again. Still, the realization did not bring joy. It brought reflection. He understood that propaganda doesn't only distort history, it reshapes identity. It steals more than truth. It steals the ability to trust. In those early years of recovery, Werner kept thinking about what the propaganda had cost his people. Not just the factories destroyed in blind obedience, but the quiet faith they had lost in one another. Families had hidden their possessions from neighbors. Workers had destroyed tools rather than share them. Fear had turned citizens into guardians of illusions. He saw it in small ways every day. The suspicion that lingered in conversations, the hesitation in cooperation, the guilt behind polite smiles. These were the real ruins left behind. Lieutenant Marcus Cole, thousands of miles away in Washington, wrote about that very cost in his final wartime study. The true victory, he wrote, is not the defeat of armies, but the survival of conscience. Propaganda seeks to erase conscience by replacing doubt with obedience. The Allied victory restored doubt, and through doubt, truth. Werner would have agreed. He often thought that truth and doubt were twins. One could not exist without the other. The lie he had lived under had offered certainty, and certainty had felt comforting. Truth, when it came, felt heavier but honest. In 1947, he received a letter from an American historian collecting testimonies for a documentary on wartime propaganda. They asked if he still kept any relics from those years. He sent them a photograph of the propaganda poster that once haunted him. On the back, he wrote only, "This picture is what I believed. The factory behind me is what I learned." That photograph later appeared in history journals and archives, used to illustrate the human side of misinformation. A simple image of contrast, illusion and redemption sharing the same space. Werner lived a quiet life through Germany's rebirth. His factory expanded under the Marshall Plan, becoming part of the new economic miracle. But prosperity never erased memory. He kept teaching younger workers to question loudly and to fear quietly. Lies, he would tell them, don't vanish when truth appears. They vanish when people stop needing them. To him, that was the greatest lesson. Propaganda worked not because people were foolish, but because they were afraid. It gave them explanations when reality felt too uncertain. It gave purpose when hope was thin. It gave identity when the world seemed to fall apart. In its comfort, it became irresistible. Decades later, in his old age, Werner sometimes visited schools to speak about those years. He never described himself as a victim or a hero. He said he was simply a man who believed too easily and who learned too late what belief can cost. He always ended his talks the same way. He would point to the framed poster he carried with him, the one showing Allied soldiers stealing German wealth, and say, "This is what fear can draw. It paints enemies who never existed. It makes us protect lies and destroy truths." Then he would show another photograph, the rebuilt factory, filled with German and American workers standing side by side. "And this," he would say, "is what truth looks like. It doesn't shout. It rebuilds." Those who heard him rarely forgot his words. He spoke softly, with pauses that felt heavier than speeches. Because what he taught wasn't history, it was warning. The propaganda war of the 1940s had ended, but its lessons reached beyond its time. It showed that truth can survive even the loudest lie, but not without cost. For every poster torn down, every rumor disproven, there were people like Werner who spent years inside illusions, fighting shadows that never existed. The American victory, in the end, was not just military, it was moral. It proved that strength could coexist with mercy, that rebuilding could follow ruin, and that truth, though late, always arrives. Werner's story became part of that larger truth, the quiet reminder that freedom is not only the absence of tyranny, but the presence of honesty. And long after the propaganda stopped broadcasting, its echo continued in every generation that learned to question what they were told.